House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the leading Democrat, is running for re-election in California's 12th congressional district, but she is facing a challenger. And we are speaking today with Shahid Buttar. Since we last spoke with them, Nancy Pelosi seems to have had something of a change on the signature issue that Mr. Buttar has been putting forward, and that is disclosure issues in terms of members of Congress disclosing their stock trade. So to talk about it, Shahid Buttar joins us. Thanks for being with us. So Nancy Pelosi says she now does support a ban on lawmakers trading stocks individually. What's your reaction?
It's long overdue and it remains quite inadequate. The controversy has been framed as the way you described it, disclosure over publicly traded stock trades. But it's actually worse than that. The ultimate problem is divided loyalties and conflicts of interest and the corporate corruption of the federal policymaking process that results. And those conflicts of interest don't just emerge from positions in publicly traded stocks, private equity investments, hedge fund investments, even real estate investments. Just as an example of this, there was a bill in 2020 that would have forced banks to pay the costs of housing, rents, and mortgage payments. It never got a hearing. It never got a vote. Might it have gotten a vote if Democrats weren't led in the House by a wealthy landlord? These are conflicts of interest that infect federal policymaking, and none of the proposed reforms that have been introduced would adequately address the problem.
House Speaker Pelosi's husband apparently had stock trades in January that she revealed of $2.9 million in Apple, Walt Disney, PayPal, and Amex. Anything particularly wrong with those companies?
Well, it's not the companies so much that she trades that are the problem. It's the ways in which those companies' interests then infect her policymaking, right? So the most visible example of this might have been her participation in the Visa IPO many years ago when she then blocked proposed credit regulation that would have favored consumers and undermined the company that she had just invested in. So it's less about the particular companies and it's more about those companies' interests. For instance, Apple is a renowned abuser of intellectual property rights. While it's better on some issues like corporate surveillance than other tech companies like Facebook, it's got problems of its own. You really can't invest in stocks without creating some sort of problem in terms of a conflict of interest and a divided loyalty. And the point ultimately is that disclosure is not enough. We need to ban policymakers from trying to profit from their offices. There is a constitutional prohibition on exactly that, the emoluments clause. The irony is that the only people in a position to enforce the emoluments clause are voters. And that's exactly why I'm running to replace a corrupt oligarch in order to help liberate at least my city's voice in Congress from this corrupting corporate influence.
And Shahid, should that ban also extend to spouses, to other family members?
Spouses, family members, staff, and their family members. No one with a hand in the federal policymaking process should be making money from it, particularly when that policymaking process does things like denying Americans the universal right to health care or impeding climate justice by continuing absurd fossil fuel subsidies. There are real world impacts of the corruption that these divided loyalties invite and entrench, and that Pelosi unfortunately embodies. And those impacts are being felt by hundreds of million Americans around the country, billions of people around the world, and untold numbers in the future who are going to have to grapple with the predatory policies passed by our Congress of millionaires filling their pockets at the public's expense.
Shahid, when we spoke to you a couple of months ago, you were hoping to have some sort of a debate or direct opportunity to question House Speaker Pelosi as part of this campaign. Has that materialized? Has there been any contact with her campaign, any willingness by her campaign to engage with you?
Not only is her campaign completely unwilling to debate, but she has been unwilling to debate for 35 years. I want to broaden the circle here. Our impending primary on June 7th is one of the best kept secrets in the country. Not a single press outlet, even in San Francisco, has covered the race once yet. And I find it bizarre that with 6 weeks remaining before a federal election over one of the most powerful seats in Congress, no one in the public has had an opportunity to hear about the issues. And so it's not just Pelosi refusing to debate, journalists are refusing to cover not just our race, but the issues. I want to make this really sharp. We put out a message to the climate change reporters at the New York Times. And one of them wrote back, and our message was about our proposal to nationalize the fossil fuel sector. At the moment, Congress is investing $20 billion a year in fossil fuel subsidies. It is absolutely insane. It would have been insane even before the climate crisis. In the middle of it, it defies description. And so we reach out to the New York Times. I'm running for Congress against Pelosi. This is one of our signature policies. And they write back, oh, this isn't something that we want to cover. And so we're going through in 2022 this reckoning over the abdication by large parts of the press of their constitutional function of informing our democracy. And I see journalists really excited right now that movies about climate change, for instance, are getting recognized at awards ceremonies, but still the discussion about the actual policies that we need to guard the future from the predation of the past. It's not just the incumbents who don't want to discuss these issues. Even the press doesn't want to discuss these issues. It's one reason I'm so grateful for your work and the work of the Young Turks, and to give viewers and voters an opportunity to hear the choices before them. That is the role of the press.
And I'll agree with you that I think it is a huge abdication of much of the media to not cover these issues, to not cover the policy debates. But what I hear from a lot of the political media who might otherwise cover your race, and I've heard this when they talk about other races around the country, is they say, well, we don't want to invest a lot of ink or a lot of airtime because we just don't think that the incumbent has any chance of losing, that this is such a powerful incumbent. Why bother suggesting that this race is competitive? How do you respond to that?
Well, ultimately, the reason that they think these races aren't competitive is because voters don't know the issues. Pelosi calls herself progressive and she gets away with it, right? She performatively kneels in kente cloth. And so people think that she's been supporting racial justice, even when she's been complicit in predatory policing. She does things like mouthing support now for the congressional, for limits on congressional insider trading, when she's been a poster child of corruption for 35 years. She talks about Democrats wanting to stand with people grappling with the challenges imposed by the pandemic, while she blocks a vote for Medicare for all from even proceeding. And as a result, Americans uniquely in the world are the only people, while everyone's dealing with the pandemic, only Americans are grappling with medical debt. And it's medical debt to the tune of tens of billions of dollars, while this oligarch has frozen the federal minimum wage for 10 years and repeatedly engineered tax breaks favoring the wealthy, herself and her wealthy friends. And if voters knew those issues, this seat would be quite competitive. A sharper way I might put that is that if the press showed up for work and San Franciscans understood how we have been represented for 35 years and my neighbors understood the choices before us, I have no doubt that I'll be the representative in the House of Representatives doing the job of championing my city's proud visionary values in the next term.
When some of us have pressed Nancy Pelosi's office, for example, on not allowing a Medicare vote, the response back is, well, look, she supports Medicare for all, but she has a responsibility to the entire Democratic caucus to look out for everybody's interests. And why bother bringing something to a vote as the leader of the Democratic caucus that is not going to pass? That she seems to sort of have this sort of understanding or this agreement that, sure, if a measure looks like it will pass the Democratic caucus, then she'll bring it forward. If it doesn't have a chance, then she won't. That distinction between her own personal views and her leadership responsibilities, what do you make of it?
It's an entirely disingenuous claim that doesn't hold water. Medicare for all is favored by bipartisan majorities across the United States. The reason Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to bring it to a vote is because A, she doesn't want members of her caucus who are unwilling to support the policy to have to bear accountability for that decision. You might include her among them. And the claim by the speaker that she is playing some four-dimensional chess, when at the end of the day, this is simply an affirmative denial of human rights. And human rights violations demand accountability. And there's no, frankly, excuse that justifies them. She can make up any number of political excuses, but at the end of the day, if we have a global pandemic, 1 million Americans dead, bipartisan majorities across the entire country favoring a proposal that is already in place around the rest of the industrialized world, there is not a single good reason that the House has not yet embraced this policy. It is an ongoing reflection of the corporate corruption of the federal making process, of the policy making process that we've been discussing.
And Shahid, as we discussed, you're not getting much attention. The political process is not covering the race. They're not covering the issues. So what do you do between now and June the 7th to try to bring this in front of the voters of California's 12th congressional district?
Great question. And I should note that among the things that have changed is the number of our district. Redistricting just completed. So we're now the 11th congressional district, only because California lost a seat. But we're working hard to reach voters in public fora like farmers markets, at public events. We're reaching them in their homes, phone banking, on the doors. We're taking a particular effort to work through supporters to engage and meet and inform their respective neighbors, friends, colleagues, family. That sort of supporter-enabled campaign puts our supporters in front. And at the end of the day, I'm not a politician, I'm an advocate and an activist and an organizer. And so our path to getting me here in the first place was organizing the community and finding people who share our concerns about the future, finding ways for them to support the campaign, not just donating and volunteering, but doing things like hosting gatherings to inform their neighbors and their friends about the issues that the press isn't covering. Those are the kinds of events that I've been very grateful for the opportunity to do. And I'm very grateful to all of our supporters, the thousands of them across the country, and particularly the podcasters who've done the work that the institutional press has failed. I should make clear that while I would only have the opportunity, if successful, to represent San Francisco, the values and the principles that I'm running on are widely shared across the country. And so we're very eager to invite anyone who cares about climate justice or healthcare or ending the corporate corruption of Congress to consider joining us, to volunteer with us from wherever you live or donating from wherever you might be at shahidforchange.us.
Shahidforchange.us. And again, people can go there until June the 7th. And Shahid, let's just suppose you don't win. Is it still something of a moral victory that you're getting at least these issues out there, whether it's on this platform or other platforms, or talking to voters of the district and clearly having an impact on Speaker Pelosi, at least moving her a little bit on when it comes to stock trades and disclosures?
It's actually the 7th issue where she's conceded a policy to our campaign. Over the course of the time that I've run for this seat, we've managed to hold Pelosi accountable and change her positions on worker rights, on civil rights and policing, funding the Postal Service, impeaching a criminal president, and asserting congressional war powers to block unilateral executive action. There's lots of issues on which we've had impacts, well beyond our race. And the opportunity to punch above my weight is what I'm grateful for, and I'm eager to hold this oligarch accountable and win my city a new voice.
Shahid Buttar, he is the opponent of Nancy Pelosi in the Democratic primary, June the 7th, California's 11th congressional district. Shahid, good luck to you, and thanks for coming on. As always, we appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me, David.